He was an American icon, a walking contradiction, a sinner who sang about salvation, a rebel who gave advice to presidents, and a man who wore black to remind everyone of the darkness he knew firsthand. But for all the well-known stories about Johnny Cash, one legend has persisted in whispers. It's the story of a single recording, a simple cassette tape that supposedly held a truth so raw it was kept hidden for decades. For 20 years, a secret recording from Johnny Cash was a mystery, supposedly locked away by the one person who knew him best: his wife, June Carter Cash. When the story of this tape finally got out, it promised to show a side of the man in black the world had never seen, a performance so controversial and pure it could redefine his legacy. So what was on that tape? And why would June, his fiercest protector, be so determined to keep it hidden? To get to the bottom of it, you have to understand the man and the long-shadowed road that led him to a single moment that would change everything. The Johnny Cash story doesn't start in a fancy recording studio or on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. It starts in the dirt of the Great Depression, in a small government colony in Dyess, Arkansas. Born J.R. Cash to poor cotton farmers, his world was all about back-breaking work under a hot sun. But it was also a world filled with music. Gospel hymns from his mother, Carrie, filled their little house, and the radio brought in voices from a world far beyond the cotton fields. He was a quiet, observant boy, deeply connected to his family, especially his older brother, Jack. Jack was 2 years older, and everything J.R. wanted to be: steady, devout, and responsible. Johnny would later say Jack was his hero and his best friend. They were inseparable, dreaming of a future beyond the poverty that surrounded them. Jack wanted to be a preacher. Johnny, inspired by the music that was his only escape, was already scribbling down songs. But in May of 1944, that future was shattered. The day it happened, a strange feeling of dread hung in the air. Their mother begged Jack not to go to his job at a local mill, asking him to go fishing with Johnny instead. But the family needed the money, and at just 14, Jack felt the weight of that responsibility. He went to work. The details of the accident are brutal. A table saw, with its safety guard apparently removed, pulled Jack into the spinning blade, nearly cutting him in two. He clung to life for over a week while the Cash family swung between agonizing hope and inevitable despair. Johnny, only 12 at the time, sat by his brother's bedside, a helpless witness as his hero's light slowly dimmed. Jack's final moments would haunt Johnny for the rest of his life. He described how Jack, with his last breaths, spoke of seeing angels and heaven. Then, he was gone. That loss became a foundational wound in Johnny's soul. Making it all worse was his father Ray's reaction. In his own grief, he allegedly blamed Johnny, words that echoed in Johnny's mind forever. An irrational but profound sense of guilt took root. This tragedy became the silent engine driving the man in black. It was the first deep sorrow in a life that would become a search for redemption. The darkness of that day fueled his art, giving his voice a weight that felt ancient. His deep baritone always seemed to be singing about more than just the words on the page. It was the sound of a man who had seen loss up close and would spend his life trying to sing his way back into the light. He wasn't just J.R. Cash anymore. He was a young man carrying a ghost, looking for a way to turn that haunting into a song. Before he was Johnny Cash, the outlaw icon, he was Staff Sergeant J.R. Cash of the United States Air Force. In 1950, looking for an escape from the cotton fields and the ghosts of his childhood, he enlisted. This wasn't just a detour, it was a secret chapter of his life, a time when he swapped his guitar for headphones and became a guardian of secrets during the Cold War. He was assigned to the 12th Radio Squadron Mobile in Landsberg, West Germany. His job wasn't on the front lines, but it put him right at the heart of the conflict. He was a Morse code interceptor, spending his days in sterile rooms, listening to the rhythmic pulse of Soviet Army transmissions. It turned out he had a rare talent for it. The Air Force saw he had a unique knack for picking patterns out of the static, a skill that would later define his musical genius. He was a natural decoder, whether the message was a secret military communication or the heartbreak hidden in a country song. The work was isolating. He was handling top-secret information, a silent witness to a clandestine world. It was in this strange setting that two pivotal things happened. First, he bought his first guitar. The loneliness and homesickness fueled his creativity, and he started his first band, the Landsberg Barbarians. Second, he watched a movie that fired his imagination, 1951's Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison. Stuck on a base in Germany, thousands of miles from home, Cash found himself identifying with the men trapped behind bars. The film planted a seed for what would become one of his most defining songs. In that German barracks, he picked up his guitar and wrote, "I hear the train a-comin', it's rollin' round the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when." Folsom Prison Blues wasn't written from experience, but from empathy, an imaginative leap from one kind of prison to another. His most famous moment as a codebreaker has become the stuff of legend. On March 5, 1953, he was at his post when he became one of the first Americans, if not the first, to learn that Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin had died, deciphering the coded message as it came across the wire. It's a story he told often, a moment where the 21-year-old from Arkansas found himself at the center of world history. After 4 years, he was honorably discharged in 1954 and came back to the States a changed man. He'd left as a boy reeling from tragedy and returned a staff sergeant with a top-secret past, a scar on his jaw from a cyst removal, and a notebook full of songs. He had spent years listening to other people's secrets, and now he was ready to tell his own. When Johnny Cash walked into Sun Studio in Memphis in 1955, he was selling appliances door to door and was newly married to his first wife, Vivian Liberto. He was hungry, determined, and a complete unknown. Sitting in front of him was Sam Phillips, the visionary producer who had discovered Elvis Presley and was crafting a sound that would change music forever. Cash's first audition was almost his last. He and his band, the Tennessee Two, played gospel songs. They were heartfelt, but they weren't what Phillips was looking for. Phillips, with his uncanny ear for authenticity, wanted something real, something raw. He famously told Cash, "Go home and sin, then come back with a song I can sell." Cash didn't have to look far for inspiration. The sin, the sorrow, the struggle, it was all right there inside him. He channeled the rhythm of the railroad tracks from his childhood and played Phillips a song he'd written called "Hey Porter." He followed it with another original, "Cry, Cry, Cry." The sound was stripped down, hypnotic, and totally unique. It had a chugging, train-like rhythm, what would become his famous boom-chicka-boom sound. This was it. This was the truth, Sam Phillips had been looking for. Success came like a flash flood. Songs like Folsom Prison Blues and I Walk the Line shot up the charts. Suddenly, Cash was a star, part of a new generation of artists, blurring the lines between country, gospel, and the new sound of rock and roll. He was thrown into relentless tours, sharing bills with Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins. Life became a whirlwind of one-night stands, endless highways, and constant pressure. It was on these tours that something else entered his life: amphetamines. In the high-pressure world of 50s and 60s touring, pep pills were everywhere. They were how you survived the grueling schedule, drove all night to the next gig, and got on stage with enough energy to perform. For Cash, they were a tool to keep going, but they quickly became something more. As he put it, "I was taking the pills for a while, and then the pills started taking me." The drugs unlocked a wild, destructive side of his personality. He became known for his chaotic behavior, trashing hotel rooms, missing shows, his performances, veering from brilliant to disastrous. The man in black image, which he said he adopted because black clothes were just easier to keep clean on the road, started to mean something else. It reflected the darkness that was swallowing him whole. The rebel image that sold records was becoming a devastating reality. He was walking a line, but he was starting to lose his balance. While Johnny Cash's life was spiraling out of control, a steadying force was about to enter his world. Her name was June Carter, and she was country music royalty. As a member of the legendary Carter family, she'd been performing since she was a little girl and had a sharp wit and an unbreakable spirit. They first met backstage at the Grand Ole Opry in 1956. Johnny confessed he'd been a fan of hers for years. The connection was instant and electric. There was just one problem. They were both married. For years, their relationship was a complicated dance of professional partnership and forbidden love. June joined his tour, and on stage, their chemistry was undeniable. She was the only one who could match his intensity, her bright humor a perfect counter to his somber presence. Off stage, she became his confidant. She saw the brilliant man behind the drug-fueled haze and refused to watch him destroy himself. But being in love with a married man was agonizing. Gut-wrenching emotion became the inspiration for one of country music's most iconic songs. Co-written by June, Ring of Fire was a cry from the heart about a love that was both passionate and torturous. When Johnny recorded it, with mariachi-style horns, an idea he said came to him in a dream. It became one of his biggest hits, a secret love song hidden in plain sight. By the mid-1960s, that fire was threatening to consume Johnny completely. His addiction was raging. He got kicked out of the Grand Ole Opry for smashing the stage lights with his mic stand. He started fires, crashed cars, and was arrested multiple times, most famously in El Paso in 1965, with a guitar case full of pills. He was the outlaw he sang about, but the reality was anything but romantic. He was gaunt, paranoid, and lost. His marriage to Vivian finally collapsed, ending in divorce in 1966. Through it all, June was the one who refused to give up on him. She saw the profound goodness in him, the man still haunted by his brother's death, who wrestled daily with his demons. After one particularly bad incident, June and her family moved in with him to help him through a painful detox. It was an act of profound faith. She gave him an ultimatum. She would be with him, but only if he got clean. On February 22, 1968, during a concert in London, Ontario, Johnny paused the show, turned to June, and proposed on stage. This time, she said yes. They were married just a week later. It was the start of a new chapter, but the embers of his past were still glowing, waiting for a chance to flare up again. By 1967, Johnny Cash's career was on life support. The hits had dried up, and his reputation for being unreliable had made him toxic in Nashville. But an old idea was taking hold again. He wanted to record a live album inside a prison. For years, he'd pitched the idea to Columbia Records, and for years they'd said no. It was a commercial risk, a move that would align him with criminals. But Cash felt a deep kinship with the incarcerated. He saw them as men who had made mistakes and were searching for grace, a mirror of his own life. His song, Folsom Prison, blues had made him a hero to inmates, who wrote him thousands of letters. With the backing of a new producer, Bob Johnston, the label finally, reluctantly, agreed. The plan was set. On January 13, 1968, Johnny Cash would perform 2 shows inside Folsom Prison. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just another concert. It was a gamble to save his career and prove to himself that he still mattered. The night before the show, the tension in his Sacramento motel room was thick. Johnny was nervous. The band, including the legendary Carl Perkins on guitar, ran through the set list. They were prepared, but no one knew what to expect. That's when a figure from the Folsom community showed up. Reverend Floyd Gressett, the prison's chaplain. He had a favor to ask. He approached Johnny, not with a prayer, but with a small, reel-to-reel tape. The tape contained a song, written and recorded by an inmate named Glenn Shirley, who was serving 5 to life for armed robbery. Shirley was a lifelong offender, but inside him was the soul of a poet. Reverend Gressett explained that he just wanted Johnny to listen to it, that it would mean the world to the inmate who wrote it. A reporter who was there, Jean Belay, happened to have a tape player. In that quiet motel room, history was about to be made. As the tape played, a deep voice, not unlike Johnny's own, filled the motel room. The song was called Greystone Chapel, and its lyrics were a raw, honest testament to finding faith in the darkest of places. "Inside the walls of prison my body may be," Shirley sang, "but the Lord has set my soul free." For Johnny Cash, it was a lightning bolt. Here was a man, locked away from the world, expressing the very struggle Johnny had lived his entire life. The battle between the prison of the flesh and the freedom of the spirit. It was a song about redemption, written from a place many considered beyond it. A smile broke across Johnny's face. This was the authentic voice he'd been searching for. This was the story he came to Folsom to tell, in a move that was both wildly, impulsive, and perfectly inspired. He announced to the room that he was going to perform the song the next day, live at the concert. He immediately started scribbling down the lyrics and working out the chords with the band. The literal answer is no. The viral legend gets the details wrong, but the spirit right. The tape wasn't hidden by June. It was nearly lost to history, passed along on a whim by a prison chaplain. The real story is much more profound. What had been hidden for years wasn't a physical object, but the raw, unfiltered truth that the tape represented. For most of his career, Johnny Cash's outlaw image had been packaged and produced. The Nashville Machine had tried to hide the most vulnerable and controversial parts of him, his addiction and his deep faith. June Carter didn't hide the tape. She was the one who helped him find his way back to the man who could sing that song. By standing by him through his darkest years, she helped him reclaim the authentic voice that had been buried. The 20 years of the legend isn't a literal time frame. It's a metaphor for the long wilderness of his addiction, the period before he finally found his redemption at Folsom. The next day, inside the prison cafeteria, the air crackled. The inmates were a tough crowd, but they were his crowd. He opened with Folsom Prison Blues, and they roared. Then, near the end of the show, he paused. He looked out at Glenn Shirley, sitting in the front row, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Cash announced, "This next song was written by our friend Glenn Shirley. I hope we do your song justice, Glenn." As the band kicked in, a look of pure shock washed over Shirley's face. It was a moment of impossible grace. A forgotten man's prayer, recorded in his cell, was being sung back to him by his hero, immortalized on an album that would change music forever. The tape hadn't been hidden, it had been found, and in being found, it had set them both free. The release of At Folsom Prison was a cultural earthquake. It soared to the top of both the country and pop charts, cementing Johnny Cash's status as a crossover superstar. More importantly, it completely revitalized his image. He was no longer a washed-up singer with a drug problem. He was reborn as the Man in Black, a gritty American folk hero and a voice for the voiceless. The Folsom album gave him a new purpose. He became a passionate advocate for prison reform, even testifying before a Senate subcommittee in 1972. He used his ABC television variety show, The Johnny Cash Show, to introduce mainstream audiences to artists like Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell. His marriage to June, solidified just before the Folsom concert, became the bedrock of his life. They had a son, John Carter Cash, in 1970, and their partnership became one of the most iconic love stories in music history. She was his anchor, the woman who had guided him toward his best self. Johnny Cash's life is a powerful story of hitting rock bottom and climbing back into the light. The legend of the Greystone Chapel tape is just one chapter in his incredible journey. What are your favorite Johnny Cash songs or moments? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next one. The decades after Folsom were a testament to Johnny's resilience. His battle with addiction was a lifelong storm, and he entered rehab again in the 1980s. Still, his creative spirit never faded. In the 1990s, when Nashville had once again written him off as a relic, he staged a stunning comeback. He teamed up with Rick Rubin, a producer from the world of hip-hop and heavy metal. Together, they created the American Recording Series, stark acoustic albums that stripped Cash's music down to its raw emotional core. This partnership led to the 2002 album American Ifo, The Man Comes Around. It featured a cover song that would become his final defining statement, Hurt, originally by the industrial rock band 9 Inch Nails. On paper, it sounded like a gimmick, but Cash transformed it from an anthem of youthful angst into a devastating meditation on a life full of regret, pain, and love. The music video became his epitaph. Filmed at the derelict House of Cash Museum, it showed a frail, 71-year-old Cash intercut with footage from his defiant youth. His face was a roadmap of his journey. His beloved June, her own health failing, watched over him. The video was a brutal, unflinching look at mortality and was hailed as one of the greatest ever made. It was the perfect bookend to his career. A final performance of the same raw truth he had discovered on that Glenn Shirley tape all those years ago. Johnny Cash died on September 12, 2003, less than 4 months after June. He left behind a legacy that's impossible to measure in record, sales alone. He was the ultimate contradiction, the sinner who sang gospel, the patriot who questioned authority, the outlaw who sought forgiveness. The legend of the hidden tape endures not because June Carter literally hid a recording, but because it captures the central mystery of Johnny Cash himself. His life was a search for unvarnished truth, whether it was in his own scarred heart or in the voice of a forgotten prisoner. The tape is a symbol of every secret he carried, every demon he fought, and every moment of grace he found along the way. It reminds us that the most powerful truths are often hidden in plain sight, just waiting for someone with the courage to listen. And Johnny Cash didn't just listen. He took that truth and turned it into a song for the whole world to hear.